The Caliphate stands at a crossroads. Abu Bakr, confronting a fracturing Arabian Peninsula, turns to a commander whose name already carries the weight of victory. Khalid Ibn Al-Walid is dispatched from the Arabian theatre to a new arena, the rich plains of Al-Iraq, where the Sasanian Empire still holds sway. His task is not mere conquest, but the forging of momentum to open a front, shatter enemy cohesion, and secure the Caliphate's eastern flank. Khalid's genius reveals itself not in single acts of valor, but in the orchestration of men and movement. He remolds disparate contingents into units that march with iron discipline. He chooses routes that leverage speed and surprise, striking where the enemy is weakest. When Persian columns converge to halt the Arab advance, Khalid does not seek a slugging match. He transforms the battlefield into a trap. At Walaja, two Persian corps attempt to envelop the Arabs. Khalid answers with a maneuver that will be cited by historians as exemplary. A concealed reserve, a feigned withdrawal, and then a concentric counterstroke that collapses the enemy from both flanks. The Persian formation, confident in its numbers, finds itself encircled by an army that moves as one mind. Prisoners and standards fall into Muslim hands. The way to Al-Hira and the Euphrates opens. This is not the work of luck, but of calculation under pressure. Khalid reads the terrain, times his marches by moon and dawn, and imposes tempo upon the campaign. The victories in Mesopotamia do more than win battles. They send a message across the region of a new polity governed by resolve and military genius. The lion's gambit has been played, and the storm it unleashes will reshape the map of empires. EVNTSCOVID, appointment to the Iraqi front, Battle of Walaja. The sands of the 7th century Arabian Peninsula were not merely a landscape, but a crucible. In this arena, a new force was being forged, and at its vanguard was a commander whose name would become a byword for military genius. This was not the triumph of a warlord, but the calculated, relentless execution of a new form of mobile warfare, conceived by Khalid Ibn Al-Walid. Following the pivotal battles at Uhud and the Trench, Khalid's strategic mind was already looking beyond the immediate horizons of the Hijaz. His was a vision of unity, not just of tribes, but of a peninsula. The Ridda Wars were his proving ground. Following the Prophet's death, when apostasy and rebellion threatened the nascent Muslim polity, Khalid was the sword of its survival. The campaigns against the false prophets and rebellious tribes were a brutal, necessary consolidation. Yet Khalid's true genius lay not merely in suppression, but in strategic foresight. The Battle of the River, or the Battle of Chains, was a masterstroke of psychological and maneuver warfare. Confronting a formidable Sasanian Persian force and their Christian Arab allies near the Euphrates, he did not meet their strength head-on. Khalid's innovation was to order his cavalry to chain their horses together, presenting a seemingly immovable, ironclad front. This was no reckless act of defense, but a deliberate trap. The Persians, bewildered by the tactic, were lured into a stationary assault. It was a feint. Khalid's true weapon was his cavalry, held in reserve. When the Persian lines were committed, his horsemen would descend like a scythe. Though the sources, as recorded by Al-Tabari, note his victory was decisive, the core of his strategy, the feint, the feigned vulnerability, the lightning counterstrike became his signature. But his strategic mind was never rigid. It was a river, not a rock. At the Battle of Walaja, facing an alliance of Arab and Persian forces, he was outnumbered 2-1. His response was a masterpiece of tactical deception. He deliberately thinned his center, inviting the enemy to drive deeply into his lines, a move that would look, to their commander, like a broken formation. As the enemy overextended, confident of victory, they marched directly into a perfect double envelopment. Khalid's cavalry, hidden from view, had circled unseen. The enemy army was surrounded and annihilated. Ibn al-Athir, in Al-Kamil fi al-Tariq, notes it as a victory through cunning and the perfect plan, a textbook example of the Kami's formation and the double envelopment. These were not mere battles for territory. They were the calculated, devastatingly precise actions of a commander who understood the desert, the limitations of his foes, and the supreme value of speed and audacity. He was not just fighting armies. He was mastering the very sands of Arabia. EVNTSCOVERED. The Ridda Wars, the Battle of the Chains, Dihat al-Salasil, the Battle of Walaja. In the year 634 CE, the sands of Arabia were stirring with the echoes of a new era. The Muslim community, now united under the Prophet Muhammad's successors, the rightly guided caliphs, had turned their gaze towards the vast and prosperous lands of the Byzantine Empire. The Roman stronghold of Bosra, a city of strategic importance, stood as a formidable barrier. The Muslim forces, led by the brilliant general Khalid Ibn Al-Walid, were determined to breach it. The Battle of Ajnab was a testament to Khalid's tactical genius. The Byzantines, under the command of the Roman governor of Syria, Romanus, had fortified their positions, believing their defences impenetrable. Khalid, however, was not one to be deterred by mere walls. He ordered his men to create a diversion, drawing the Byzantines out of the city. Meanwhile, a contingent of Muslim warriors scaled the walls, opening the gates from within. The element of surprise was decisive. The Byzantines, caught off guard, were swiftly defeated. Bosra fell, and with it, the gates to Syria were thrown open. The victory at Bosra was not merely a military triumph, it was a turning point in history. It marked the beginning of the Muslim conquest of Syria, a region that had been under Roman rule for centuries. The fall of Bosra sent shockwaves through the Byzantine Empire, signaling the rise of a new power in the region. The Muslims, under the leadership of Khalid ibn al-Walid, were no longer just a force to be reckoned with. They were the architects of an empire in the making. EVNTSCOVERED. Battle of Ajnab, Fall of Bosra, Muslim conquest of Syria. The year 633 brought a new horizon. With Arabia secured, the Caliph Abu Bakr turned his gaze toward the ancient empires that had ruled the world for centuries. To the north lay two giants, the Byzantine Romans and the Sasanian Persians, both exhausted from decades of mutual destruction, yet still formidable beyond measure. Khalid received his orders. Iraq, the heartland of Persian power, would be his theatre. The Sasanian Empire, heir to Cyrus and Darius, commanded armies that had crushed nations. Their heavy cavalry, the Savarin, were legends of warfare. Their generals had never heard of this desert commander. They would learn. Khalid crossed into Iraq with forces numbering in the thousands, facing Persian armies 5 times his size. At Chains, so named for the Persians' practice of chaining their front lines together to prevent retreat, Khalid shattered their formations with a maneuver that would echo through military academies for centuries. He divided his force, struck from multiple angles, and turned Persian discipline into a trap. The chains that were meant to ensure courage became shackles of death. The Persians sent Bahman, a seasoned general, with elephants and elite units. At the Battle of the River, Khalid demonstrated what classical historians call his uncanny ability to read terrain. He forced the Persian army against the Euphrates, eliminating their room to maneuver. When the battle ended, the river ran red for 3 days, according to Al-Tabari's chronicle. Then came Ulay, where Khalid faced a combined Persian-Arab Christian force. The sources record that he vowed the canal would flow with enemy blood. It was not poetry. For 2 days after the battle, his men diverted the canal through the killing field until his oath was fulfilled. 4 victories. 4 Persian armies destroyed. The Sword of God had announced his arrival to the world's superpowers. EVNTSCOVID. Battle of Chains, Battle of the River, Battle of Ale. The whispers of victory at Yarmouk had not yet faded when a new storm gathered on the horizon. The Sasanian Empire, a titan of the East, reeling from initial losses, now marshaled its might. Their vast armies, a tapestry of disciplined warriors and fearsome cavalry, were poised to reclaim what they perceived as their ancient dominion. The Caliph Abu Bakr, ever vigilant, turned to his most trusted sword, Khalid Ibn Al-Walid. The order was clear: march east towards the heart of Persia and confront this formidable foe. Khalid, with his seasoned veterans, embarked on a campaign that would test the very limits of endurance and strategy. The terrain was unforgiving, the enemy deeply entrenched. But Khalid's brilliance lay not just in the clash of steel, but in the intricate dance of warfare. He understood that victory was often forged before the first arrow flew. He moved with a speed that defied the vastness of the desert, outmaneuvering Persian detachments, sowing confusion and striking with surgical precision. The Battle of the Chains, a testament to his tactical acumen, saw the Sasanian army, bound by their own arrogance and a literal chain of men, shattered by Khalid's relentless assault. This was no mere skirmish. It was a calculated dismantling of an empire's pride, a demonstration of an unyielding will against overwhelming odds. EVNTSCOVID. Battle of the Chains, Persian campaign advance. When the tide of conquest receded and the boots of battle were set aside, a quieter storm gathered in the halls of authority. Caliph letter 2BF, Umar ibn al-Kh letter 1E6D letter 1E6DA Macron B, guardian of a nascent polity that now spanned continents, faced an unforgiving test: how to preserve the unity of the community while honoring the commanders whose genius had made expansion possible. Classical chroniclers record that complaints reached the Caliph, not of treason, but of fear, the fear that one man's fame might eclipse the authority of the state. In the exercise of that grave duty, letter 2BF Umar did what he believed justice required. He relieved Khalid ibn al-Walid of his supreme military command and appointed others to administer the Syrian provinces. The decision was stern, deliberate, and rooted in principle. No individual, however illustrious, should become a rival center of power. Khalid's response was the sternest measure of his own character. He accepted the Caliph's order with humility and silence, forsaking rank but not dignity. He did not mount a defense, rally troops, or cleave to ambition. He submitted to the public order he had served. Khalid withdrew to his residence in Al letter 1E25 IM letter 1E63, where he lived the remainder of his life, away from the clamor of command. Chroniclers describe a man who, after decades of war, embraced privacy and the company of his family, while remaining a living memory to a generation of soldiers. His death, in the year recorded by historians as 642 of the Common Era, closed the life of one whose campaigns had altered the map of the world. The verdict of the early chroniclers is unambiguous. Khalid's military gifts were unparalleled. His removal was a political necessity. His story, as preserved by our authorities, is thus a study in two arts, the art of war and the art of restraint, and in the fragile balance between individual glory and the common good. The sword that had cut a path for a people was sheathed by a sovereign's hand, and by choice of the warrior himself. EV Dismissal by Caliph letter 2BF UMRR. Retirement to Homs. Al letter 1825 IM letter 1863. Death and burial in Homs.